Hey guys, today I am making the Sunrise in the Garden soap that's part of our cottage garden collection that just released last week. This is sort of a layered soap, sort of an embed soap. It was a pretty lengthy process. Here I'm starting by mixing a small amount of my oils with a small amount of my lye solution to do the bottom layer. I'm straining my lye solution today because I did let it sit for a little while, and I wanted to make sure that if there were any lye crystals that I sifted them out before mixing them into my oils. That way the final soap doesn't end up with any lye crystals in it. Because this is a small amount of soap, I'm going to stick blend it, but it's not going to take super long at all. The main thing to keep in mind when stick blending this small amount of soap is that you will have a higher propensity for air bubbles to form. So really make sure that the oils and lye are coming up over that top bump portion, I don't know what it's called, of the stick blender, basically the part that actually does the blending. Now that my lye and my oils are emulsified, I'm adding the colorant. For the bottom layer, I'm doing 2 different shades of green. I wanted to make it look like an actual garden scene, so I wanted to use different shades of green. So I have a lighter one and a darker one. You can't really see me adding the darker mica to the other batch because I didn't have my camera set super well today. I'm going to go ahead and mix that in by hand. I'm trying not to accelerate the batch too much. I want it to be pretty runny for when I pour because I want the lighter green and the darker green to swirl together. I'm adding my fragrance oil for this layer just into the darker green. It's all going to mix in with the lighter green anyway, so I didn't want to fiddle with having to mix a little bit into the darker green and a little bit into the lighter green. I'm going to be swirling them into the same pitcher anyway. It was at this point that I noticed that there was just the tiniest little bit of ricing in the soap batter, which means that the fragrance oil sometimes makes it a little bit clumpy. But I didn't want to stick blend it again because I really wanted that fluid batter to start, like I said, so that I could swirl the 2 greens together. So I made the executive decision just to go for it with my reckless abandon and see what happens. I'm getting the lighter green ready to pour into that darker green. I just wanted to make sure I scraped the bottom of that. Sometimes if you don't fully mix your colorant in, you end up with little bits of uncolored soap, and it can mess up a design depending on what you're doing. So I always like to make sure I give that bottom a good final scrape. Pouring the light green slowly into the dark green. I didn't do, sometimes when you do a swirl like this, you would hold the other color of pitcher up really, really high to get more of a swirl, but I didn't want to go too crazy because I knew the way that I was going to be pouring it, it would get enough of a swirl anyway. So I'm getting ready to pour it into my soap mold. This is just a mold I got off of Amazon, really. It gives me about 10 bars of soap. For me, I do like a 40-ounce batch of soap, and it fits just fine. I'm pouring in a little bit of the green. What's going to end up happening is I have, if you look on the left-hand side of this screen, all these little embeds that I had made that are going to get layered into the soap. To make those embeds, I took my basic soap recipe and I turned it into a soap dough. So I'm following the I Dream in Soap method, where you make your regular soap, and instead of pouring it into a mold and letting it kind of dry out, you pour it into a container lined with clear wrap, saran wrap, whatever you want to call it, with the clear wrap, and then you enclose it around the dough while it's still a liquid. Cover it tight. I do mine in just a Tupperware container. Wrap it in the plastic, put the lid on it, let it sit for a day. And then when you unwrap it, you have this pliable soap that's called soap dough. It's kind of reminiscent of Play-Doh. It comes out a little bit sticky, but the more you work with it, it gets less sticky. So I took my soap dough that I made in a couple of different colors and I put it through this mini clay extruder that I bought for doing this kind of stuff. My hope, I had my fingers crossed through all of this, was that these little circles or cylinders I had extruded would come out looking like abstract flowers inside of a garden. So that's why I have the different colors. And I wanted it at varying heights. So you can see in the video that I have this little pink tool that I'm kind of pressing some of it down in, and then I'm going to add another layer of this soap batter, and then I'm going to do more layers of the different flowers. This process does take a while. That's why I don't make just a whole ton of these. It is much more time intensive than just, pouring soap into the mold, but I think it ends up looking really, really pretty. The inspiration for this soap was literally a sunrise in a garden. That's why I named it that. But a lot of my inspiration came from abstract paintings like Monet's. If you look at a lot of his paintings, he does a lot of flower scenes, water lilies, that kind of thing. And so I wanted to make the whole soap look kind of abstract instead of taking it super literal. I still have a couple layers to go and a lot of embeds to go, so I'm going to play some music and speed up the rest of this part of the video, and then I'll be back when I'm done. Now that I've got everything in place for the green layer or the flowers layer, I'm texturing the top just to give it more of an organic vibe. I didn't want it to be super flat and straight before I went on to the next layer. So I'm using that same little random pink tool. I don't even know where that came from. I'm pretty sure it was out of one of my kids' air dry clay sets, and I liked it so much that I stole it from them. So yeah. For the second half of the soap, I'm working on the swirl layer, which has the different colors that will end up looking like the sunrise. I had my fingers crossed at this point that that's what it was going to end up being, and you'll see in the end that it did work out. Right now, I'm splitting my batch into the different colors. There's five colors that I swirl together. So here I'm weighing it. I wanted to make sure that I got them equal. And now I'm just adding the colors into the different containers that I had split everything into. So there's a light blue, a dark blue, a yellow, an orange, and then this pinkish color. I forgot which one I used. It's like a kind of it looks magenta in there, but it does come out to be a softer shade of pink. And I really wanted, like I said, the vibrant sunrise colors. Like when you look at the most colorful sunrise, that's what I was going for. I'm hand blending all the colors in. I wanted to make sure that I didn't accelerate my batter, which means make it thicker. I needed a really fluid soap batter for the pour that I wanted to do. So I'm blending it by hand with the spatula here, making sure to really scrape the sides well so that I didn't end up with any uncolored soap messing up my beautiful sunrise picture that I had going on. So I'm going to finish mixing all the colors and then I will be back. My colors are all blended. I'm just taking the last little bit of scraping that I need to do in my big container, and now I'm going to start to pour my smaller soap amounts into my base light blue layer. And being really careful on how I pour, because I do have so many colors, I didn't want them to get muddled together before I even got them into the mold. So I'm taking my time here to pour slowly down the sides of that pitcher so that each individual color kind of just pools with itself and doesn't spread all over. Now I'm going back with my orange and my pink. And I was trying to be really careful too about what colors I even put next to each other. Sometimes when you put certain colors together, they just start to mix, and certain colors mixed together don't look very pretty. So I wanted to be really careful, again, even about what colors I put next to each other. I'm not scraping out my smaller containers at this time because I wanted to save some of that soap batter, the colored soap batter, for the top of the soap, which you'll see later in the video. If I was completely done with these colors, I would have taken the time to scrape them out with my spatula and make sure I got every little bit of soap out, but not necessarily for the way that I'm going to finish this soap. Now I'm taking that big container and I'm passing back and forth across that green layer that has the flower embeds in it. You can see when I pour, that green layer didn't move at all. It was totally set up by the time that I had come back to it. Because I'm not using a tool of any sort to swirl my soap colors around, again, I didn't want it to blend together too much and start looking muddy. I'm going back and forth slowly with my passes to make sure that I get little bits of color, each color, into every bar of soap. Honestly, I don't always love doing that. I think going slow is one of the hardest things for me in soap making. Like, a lot of my layered soaps end up messed up because I get really impatient and I just dump the rest of the soap batter in. I blame my squirrel brain for that, or my reckless abandon. That's what my husband tells me. So I scraped the rest of all of my mixed colors together, and now I'm going back with that little bit of each individual color that I had saved, and it really was just a small amount. I'm going to scrape each of those colors out of the container and onto the top of my soap so that I can do a really pretty swirl on the top. So I started with the red, going in with the orange. Next is going to be that darker blue color. And then finally I'll go in with that yellow and make sure I get all that scraped in too. This whole collection this time around is super meaningful to me. The whole theme is cottage garden, and gardening is my passion. I mean, soap making is my passion, but as far as just like fun things that I love to do and will always do and have done for a very long time, gardening is it for me. I look forward to the gardening season so much. I keep expanding our backyard garden, and it brings me joy. And I hope all of you have something that brings you joy like that, because it's just really soothing for the soul to have something like that. Anyway, that was a big digression. So I am swirling the top of my soap. I'm just using the back of a paintbrush here, and this is called a Taiwan swirl, the way that I'm doing it. So I'm carefully going back and forth in a pattern on the top of my soap. I'm not going really deep with the paintbrush because I don't want to swirl together all of those bottom layers. It's just for that very top layer. And then I go around the outside a couple times to give it that swirling motion that you can kind of see where the edges curl around just a tiny little bit. Here is a close-up of what we've got going on this lovely, lovely, gorgeous soap. I'm so in love with this one. Next day, the soap has set, and I am going in to cut the whole loaf of soap. So I'm going to take off a little tiny bit of the end. Not that there's anything wrong with the tiny little bit of the end, but especially when you're doing intricate designs like this, sometimes it doesn't actually go through all the way to the very end, and it just gives it a cleaner look on both sides when you cut off one end. I don't throw those ends away. I do save them. I use them for displays. So where I have my soaps stocked and when I do vendor events, I'll have a display with all my soaps. And then I like to put a little piece of that end out for people to smell. Sometimes it's just easier to smell the soap itself than trying to smell through the plastic. I do use shrink wrap on my soaps, so it helps for people to be able to get a better sense of what the scent is. On this soap, I'm marking it. I used to have a taped line on this cutter, but I found I wasn't always being really accurate with my cuts. So I have started marking with a ruler where I need to cut. It worked out a little bit better. Someday I'll get one of those, huge fancy cutters. But all right, here I have to apologize. The angle is so terrible. So that was not the best view of what this soap looks like on the inside. The next cut is way better. Getting lined up again, cutting where I have that marked line, and ta-da! Look at that soap. Look at the sunrise on the top, those swirl colors. The flowers, I was so pleased with how they turned out. I was a little bit nervous that they wouldn't look florally enough, but I think they turned out super, super cute. So I'm going to go through cutting the rest of the bar of soap. Last couple cuts. I got my end bar. I'm going to cut the little tiny sliver of end piece off that. But I want to know, are you guys gardeners too? If you are a gardener, what's your favorite thing to grow? I always love to hear if there's new stuff I should be trying. So tell me in the comments, are you a gardener? What do you like to grow? Here's your last look at our sunrise in the garden soap. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day or morning or night, whatever time you're watching this, and we'll see you next time.